Dlamini stopped breathing the moment he saw her. The black SUV stood frozen at the edge of the slum, its polished body absurd against the mud smoke and rusted tin roofs. Just ahead, barefoot in the dust, a thin girl balanced a tray of oranges on her head and shouted prices to passing strangers. Then she turned, the scar on her wrist, the eyes, the face he had buried in his mind for 8 long years. Amala. But Amala was dead. That was what they had told him. That was what the fire had taken. So why was his missing daughter alive and selling fruit in the streets while the city called him a king? What would you do if you found someone you loved in the one place they should have never been? Would blood be enough to reclaim them after years of absence? Tell me in the comments. And where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? If you love powerful emotional stories like this, subscribe and stay with us for the journey. Dlamini did not return home that evening as a man. He returned as a wound. The gates of his estate opened in silence. Guard saluted. Garden lights glowed over trimmed hedges and imported stone. Water spilled softly down the black marble fountain in the center courtyard. Everything was polished, ordered, controlled. But inside him, something had broken loose. He stepped out of the SUV without waiting for the driver. Baraka moved to speak, saw Juma's face, and stopped. That alone told him enough. In 15 years of service, Baraka had seen the billionaire angry drunk on victory cold in negotiation and shattered once, only once, on the night they told him his daughter was dead. This face was worse. Sir Baraka asked quietly. Juma kept walking. Nobody comes into my study. Even Madame Naledi Juma paused. The question cut deeper than it should have. Especially now. Especially her. Baraka nodded once. Understood. Juma entered the mansion and felt the old chill wrap around him. The house had too much space and too little warmth. Art hung on the walls. Rare wood gleamed under soft yellow light. Expensive silence stretched from corridor to corridor like a private religion. It had always been built to impress. Tonight it felt like a tomb. He went straight to the study. He locked the door. Then he stood still in the middle of the room, staring at the dark shelves, the leather chairs, the framed photos, as if one of them might suddenly speak the truth. On the far wall stood a silver-framed portrait of Amale at 6 years old, before the fire, before the funeral, before grief had become furniture in the house. She was laughing in the photo, head tilted back, hair braided with yellow beads, one front tooth missing. He had once looked at that picture every day, then less and less. Not because he loved her less, because survival had demanded distance. Tonight he grabbed the frame and held it so tightly his knuckles whitened. "I saw you," he whispered. His voice cracked on the last word. He set the frame down carefully, then moved with sudden violence. Drawer after drawer opened, file cabinets slammed, boxes were dragged from shelves. Old insurance papers, press reports, internal security records, hospital bills, legal correspondence. He pulled them all out and spread them across the desk, the rug, the couch, the floor. For years he had refused to revisit the night of the fire in detail. He had told himself there was dignity in letting the dead rest. That grief did not need autopsies. That pain could be buried and still stay buried. But now another thought hunted him. What if I buried the truth instead? He found the original incident file just before midnight. His breathing slowed. The thick folder was labeled in red. Private family matter resolved. Resolved. The word made something hot rise in his throat. He opened it. At first glance it looked complete. Fire department summary. Police response notes. Security briefing. Medical records, statement from the family doctor, legal closure forms, a typed recommendation from family attorney Themben Cube, advising the family to avoid further public spectacle for the sake of emotional recovery and corporate stability. Corporate stability. Juma's eyes hardened. He turned pages more carefully now. There. First, irregularity. The fire report stated that one child's body had been recovered from the East Wing nursery corridor burned beyond visual identification. But the page that should have contained the forensic confirmation was missing its attachment. Only a note remained, identity presumed based on circumstances. Presumed, he kept reading. The hospital intake sheet referenced a deceased minor transferred from the scene, but the timestamp was wrong. The document claimed the body arrived at the hospital before the ambulance dispatch time listed in police records. Impossible. He reached for another file. Security log. The mansion's internal camera system had failed between 1:12 a.m. and 2:03 a.m., the exact period during which the fire spread through the private wing. Cause of failure: corrupted data due to heat damage. Juma's jaw tightened. The camera servers were housed in a reinforced utility room on the other side of the property, far from the fire. He knew because he had chosen the system himself. He read faster now, anger sharpening his focus. One page led to another. One lie led to a larger one. Insurance correspondence mentioned reconstruction costs, but never itemized the child's death benefits. The statement from the family doctor used strangely vague language. Tragic loss consistent with events described by household staff. Consistent with events described. Not confirmed by examination. Juma looked up slowly. His chest rose once. Fell once. Then he snatched his phone and called Baraka. Baraka answered on the first ring. "Yes, sir. Come to the study." "Alone." 30 seconds later, Baraka entered and shut the door behind him. His eyes moved over the papers, scattered across every surface. "Something is wrong," he said. "Everything is wrong," Juma replied. He handed him the hospital sheet, then the fire report, then the security log. Baraka read in silence. His face changed with each page. "This was signed off years ago," Baraka said at last. "I know. You think it was manipulated?" Juma stared at him. "I saw a girl today." Baraka's hand froze over the file. Juma continued, voice lower now. "More dangerous. In the slums near McKenna Junction. Selling oranges. She turned, and for 1 second I thought grief had finally made me mad." Baraka said nothing. "The scar on her wrist," Juma went on. "Same place. Same shape. A small crescent. She got it when she was 4, trying to grab a broken music box from the fireplace mantel. You remember that, I do. She looked at me like I was nothing, like I was just another man in a car." He swallowed. "But it was her." Baraka took a breath. "You are sure?" Juma's eyes flashed. "No father is ever sure after 8 years of being told to bury his child. That is the cruelty of this." He pointed to the papers. "But I am sure enough to know these records smell rotten." Baraka placed the files down carefully. "What do you want me to do?" "Quietly pull everything. Not from the family office, not from internal storage. I want copies from the hospital archive, fire department, police registry, and the original security contractor. No alerts, no calls that can be traced back to the house." He paused. "And Baraka, do not trust anyone who worked here that year unless I name them myself." Baraka understood the weight of that immediately. "That includes Mandla?" he asked. The old chief steward had served the household for decades. "Yes." "Themba Nkube?" "Yes." Baraka hesitated. "Madam Naledi." Silence filled the room. It was the kind of silence that changed lives. Juma turned away and looked at Amahli's portrait again. He remembered the months after the fire. Naledi had held him when he could not sleep. Naledi had insisted the press be kept away. Naledi had urged him not to rip open the grave by chasing rumors. Naledi had said healing required acceptance. At the time, her calm had felt like mercy. Now, for the first time, it looked like management. Yes, Juma said finally. Her, too. Baraka nodded once more. Then I start tonight. He moved toward the door. Baraka. The driver turned. Juma's voice dropped to a raw whisper. If this is true. Baraka waited. If my daughter lived through that fire while I spent 8 years lighting candles for a grave she was never in. He stopped fighting the tremor in his chest. Then someone did more than lie to me. Baraka's face hardened. Yes. They stole her life. Baraka left. Juma remained standing in the middle of the wrecked study, surrounded by paper ghosts. The house felt different now, not just cold, hostile. Every polished table, every soft carpet, every carefully curated object suddenly seemed touched by conspiracy. A soft knock came at the door. Not Baraka. He didn't answer. Another knock. Then Naledi's voice, gentle and practiced. Juma, are you awake? He closed his eyes. For years that voice had floated through this house like silk. Controlled. Elegant, never too loud, never careless. The voice of a woman who knew how to enter a room without disturbing its balance. Tonight it sounded like a blade wrapped in velvet. Juma, I heard you came in. You missed dinner. He said nothing. The handle moved slightly. Locked. A beat passed. Are you all right? He looked at the scattered papers again. The missing forensic confirmation. The broken timeline, the wiped cameras, the signatures, the convenient assumptions. All those years he had thought grief had hollowed him out. Now he realized something worse. He had been managed inside his grief. I'm working, he said at last. Naledi waited a moment too long before replying. You should sleep soon. You've looked tired lately. So have liars, Juma thought. I said I'm working. Silence. Then her footsteps retreated. Juma did not move until the sound disappeared completely. After that he crossed the room, opened the hidden safe behind the bookshelf, and removed a small velvet box he had not touched in years. Inside was the matching half of Amahli's childhood necklace, gold-shaped like a tiny sun. The other half had been on her neck the night of the fire. He held it in his palm. If the girl in the slums was truly his daughter, then somewhere out there was the missing piece of a life someone had tried to erase. Outside, the mansion slept beneath its perfect lights. Inside, Juma sat alone until dawn, reading every page again. By morning, grief was no longer the thing driving him. It was suspicion, and suspicion once awakened did not go back to sleep. By the next afternoon, Juma Dlamini had learned 2 things. First, money could open almost any door. Second, some truths hated being bought. Baraka returned just after noon with a thin folder, a tired face, and the kind of silence that always arrived before bad news. Juma was standing by the window in his study, still wearing the same dark shirt from the night before. He had not slept. The estate below him glimmered under the African sun, gardeners trimming hedges, staff crossing stone paths, sprinklers misting imported grass. Order everywhere, wealth everywhere, and yet his mind was stuck in the slums, where dust clung to bare feet and children learned to bargain before they learned to dream. What did you find? Juma asked. Baraka stepped inside and closed the door. Enough to make this worse. He handed over the folder. Juma opened it immediately. There is no external forensic confirmation attached to the hospital archive, Baraka said. Not in the original registry. Not in the backup. The police file references a body, but the identification was signed off using household testimony and circumstantial assumption. Household testimony. Juma repeated coldly. Baraka nodded. The fire department has a similar gap. The officer who filed the final summary retired 6 years ago. His deputy is dead. The data request triggered questions, so I stopped before it reached the wrong ears. Juma flipped through photocopied pages, jaw hardening. And the security contractor? That part is worse. Baraka exhaled slowly. The server room was never damaged. A technician's maintenance note logged a manual override 2 hours before the fire. Someone with internal authorization disabled part of the system. Juma looked up. Internal authorization, he said. Yes. Can you trace the user? The original credential log was wiped. Of course it was. Juma shut the folder and stared at nothing for a moment. It was no longer just suspicion now. The lie had bones, weight, shape. What about the girl, he asked. Baraka was ready for that. I went back to McKenna Junction at sunrise. The fruit sellers know her, but no one trusts strangers who arrive in polished shoes. I kept my distance. Her street name is Zuri. Street name, yes. Nobody there seemed to know another. Juma turned that over in his mind. Zuri. Beautiful. A borrowed name for a stolen life. She works the roadside from morning until late afternoon, Baraka continued. Sometimes fruit, sometimes boiled ground nuts, sometimes sachets of water when it's too hot for oranges to move fast. She doesn't stay in one place long. Smart girl. Watches everyone. Counts change without looking twice. And she protects a younger boy. Juma's expression shifted. Her brother. Not by blood from what I gathered. Sick child. Maybe 7. Thin, persistent cough. They say she shares food with him before she eats herself. That landed in Juma's chest like a stone. Amale had once thrown a tantrum because she wanted mango slices peeled in spirals, not cubes. He used to laugh about it. Now all he could picture was a girl standing in traffic smoke, selling fruit to keep another child alive. Who does she live with, he asked. A woman named Nombuso. Juma's eyes sharpened. Age, maybe early 40s? Hard to tell. Poverty ages people faster than time. Relationship. Baraka hesitated. That depends who you ask. Some say she is the mother. Others say she found the girl years ago after some kind of disaster and never let her go. A few think she is hiding from somebody. Juma stepped away from the window. Kidnapper, he said flatly. Maybe Baraka replied. Or maybe not. Juma shot him a look. Baraka did not flinch. Sir, if someone had stolen a rich man's daughter, why keep her poor? Why leave her in plain sight? Why let her sell fruit on a public road where half the city could pass by? Juma said nothing, because that question had already been tormenting him. They left an hour later in Baraka's older sedan, not the armored SUV. No driver uniforms, no security convoy, no family crest on the plates. Juma wore a faded charcoal shirt, plain trousers and dark glasses. Expensive still, if one looked closely, but not loudly so. The city changed street by street as they drove. Glass towers gave way to cracked shop fronts. Paved lanes turned uneven. Billboards thinned out. Drainage worsened. Children chased flat footballs through red dust. Women balanced buckets on their heads. Men argued over diesel prices in front of rusted kiosks. Smoke from charcoal stoves hung low in the heat. Then came Makana Junction. The slum did not begin cleanly. It bled into the city like an open wound. Tin roofs pressed against each other. Narrow alleys ran between patched walls made of tarp wood and sheet metal. Open drains cut black lines through the pathways. Music fought with traffic. Laughter fought with coughing. Survival made its own noise. Baraka parked under the shade of a half-dead jacaranda tree. "You stay close," he said quietly. Juma had spent years being obeyed. Here, for the first time in a long time, he listened. They walked past stalls of tomatoes, second-hand sandals, old batteries, fried cassava, cheap soap, and piles of phone chargers that probably worked only on prayer. Life was everywhere. So was exhaustion. Then Juma saw her. She stood beside a wooden crate near the roadside, a tray of oranges arranged with more care than the setting deserved. Her dress was faded green, her sandals were broken at one strap and tied with string. Sweat glistened at her temple. Sunlight hit the side of her face. And there it was again, that unbearable familiarity. She was older now, thinner, sharper around the edges. Childhood had been forced out of her too early, but the eyes were the same deep brown as his late first wife, Abeni. The same stillness before a decision. The same stubborn chin. Amahle. No Zuri. She lifted an orange and called out to a passing motorcyclist. "Sweet ones, taste first, then pay." The rider laughed and kept going. She rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and rearranged the fruit. Juma almost smiled. Amahle used to do that when annoyed, speak to the air, as if the air were the guilty party. Baraka touched his elbow lightly. Careful, because Juma had already taken a step forward without realizing it. A coughing fit sounded from the shade behind the stall. A small boy sat on an overturned bucket, knees too thin, sweater too big, watching Zuri with tired eyes. She turned, instantly poured water from a reused bottle cap, and crouched beside him. Slowly she told him. "Not like a goat. Sip." The boy obeyed. Juma felt something inside him tear, not because she was kind, because she had learned to be. No child learned that kind of vigilance unless life had demanded it. A customer approached a woman arguing over price. Zuri stood again, chin lifting. She refused to be cheated even for one coin. The negotiation went fast, sharp, almost funny. She won. The customer grumbled, but paid. Baraka leaned closer. "She has your fire." Juma's gaze never left her. "No, she has hers." The word surprised even him. For years he had imagined that if Amahle were alive, he would recognize himself in her. His blood, his legacy, his world. But the girl before him did not belong to his world at all. She belonged to this harsh sun, this dust, this noise, this constant alertness. She had been shaped elsewhere, shaped without him. A woman emerged from a nearby alley, carrying a plastic basin on her hip. She was tall but worn down by labor, with a headscarf tied neatly over tired eyes. She moved toward Zuri with the guarded focus of someone who trusted almost nothing. "Nombuso." Zuri said something to her, handed over a few folded notes, and pointed at the boy. Nombuso nodded, touched the child's forehead, then looked up. Her gaze landed on Juma. Everything changed. It happened in less than a second. Recognition. Fear. Calculation. Nombuso's body stiffened. She did not gasp. She did not shout. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, she moved with terrifying precision. "Zuri," she said too calmly. "Pack up." The girl frowned. "But we still have... now." Zuri turned, noticed Juma fully for the first time, and narrowed her eyes. He saw it then, not recognition, not yet, but instinctive distrust. A rich man's watch, clean clothes, controlled posture. The kind of man who usually arrived in places like this to take, not give. Juma forced himself not to rush her. He stepped forward slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Zuri's hand went to the boy's shoulder. Protective. Immediate. "She didn't ask you," she said. Her voice was low, steady, older than her years. For a moment, Juma forgot every prepared sentence. All the questions in his mind scattered like birds. He had imagined tears, maybe shock, maybe some miraculous spark of memory. Instead, his missing daughter looked at him like a threat. "I only want to talk," he said. Nombuso came between them. "No," she replied. "Just one word." But it carried history. Baraka stepped in gently. "Mama, please. We're not police. We only need a moment." Nombuso's face hardened further. "That is what dangerous men always say." Juma's pulse kicked. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "I know exactly who you are," Nombuso said. The air seemed to tighten around them. Zuri looked from one adult to the other. "What is this?" No one answered fast enough. Then the small boy coughed again, harder this time, folding over himself. Zuri dropped instantly to help him. Nombuso knelt too. In that small burst of chaos, the conversation snapped apart. By the time the coughing stopped, a crowd's curiosity had begun to gather at the edges. Faces turned. Whispers spread. Juma knew enough not to make a scene. Not here. Not yet. Nombuso stood, eyes blazing now. "Leave," she said. "If you have any mercy left in you, leave before you destroy what little peace she has." Juma stared at her. "Mercy left in you. Not if. Not do you have. Left." As if she knew what had already been taken from him. As if she knew much more. He wanted to demand answers. Wanted to drag the truth out into the street and force it to breathe. But one look at Zuri, at the way she held the sick boy, at the way her body curled protectively around him, stopped him. If he pushed now, she would run, and if she ran, he might lose her again. So Juma did the hardest thing he had done in years. He stepped back. "We'll leave," he said. Then looking at Zuri, he added softly, "But I'll come back." She met his gaze without fear. "Then come back with honesty," she said. The words hit him harder than any accusation, because somewhere deep inside Juma knew she was right. Juma Dlamini did not speak for the first 10 minutes after they left Makena Junction. Baraka drove carefully through the late afternoon traffic while heat shimmered above the road and vendors weaved between cars with roasted maize bottled water and phone chargers dangling from their hands. The city kept moving. Buses groaned, motorbikes cut through impossible gaps. Somewhere music pounded from a stall speaker with a torn membrane. But inside the car, silence sat like a third passenger. Juma stared out at the window and saw only one thing. Zuri kneeling in the dirt, one hand supporting the coughing boy, the other shielding him from strangers. Not fear for herself. Protection for someone weaker. Amala had been raised in silk and glass. The child he had seen today had been raised in survival. And still somehow kindness had survived the journey. That was the part he could not bear, because kindness in comfort was easy. Kindness in suffering cost blood. "She knows me," he said at last. Baraka kept his eyes on the road. "Nombuso does." Juma nodded once. Not from television, not from newspapers, not in the way poor neighborhoods know rich names. "She knew me personally." "Yes, and she hates me." Baraka took a breath. "Or fears what comes with you." Juma turned his head slowly. "You think I'm the danger?" "I think," Baraka said carefully, "that if she kept the girl hidden for years, then she believed danger existed somewhere near your world." The words settled heavily. Juma looked away again. "Near your world. Not just near your house. Not just near the fire. Near your world." When they reached the estate, he did not go inside immediately. He stood in the courtyard beside the fountain while evening gathered over the property. The water kept falling in elegant silence. Staff passed at a distance and pretended not to look at him. He remembered a different evening years ago, long before the fire when Amahle had run around this fountain with wet shoes and shrieking laughter. Abeni had been alive then. She had stood on the steps pretending to scold their daughter while smiling too much to make it believable. That memory had once warmed him. Now it accused him. How had he gone from that man to this one, a father who needed strangers to tell him where his child had spent her hunger? He went inside only when the light had thinned to blue. Naledi was waiting in the dining room. Of course she was. The long table was set for two beneath soft pendant lights. Silverware gleamed. A housemaid stood by the wall like part of the furniture. Naledi sat at the far end in a cream dress posture, perfect expression composed. Any outsider would have called her elegant. Juma tonight saw something else. Stillness sharpened into strategy. "You missed lunch," she said, folding her napkin. "And breakfast." Juma took his seat without answering. Naledi dismissed the maid with a glance. The woman disappeared immediately, grateful to escape whatever air was building between husband and wife. Only then did Naledi study him fully. "You look terrible," she said. "I've been working." "So I heard." She poured water into his glass with her own hand, on what Juma looked at the glass but did not touch it. Old files. A tiny pause. Business, no. He let the word remain there. Naledi placed the water jug down gently. "You shouldn't do this to yourself again. Do what dig up pain." Her tone was soft, tender almost. It would have fooled most people. It had fooled him for years. Juma leaned back in his chair. Interesting choice of words. Naledi's eyes narrowed by less than a fraction. "Is it... You said dig up pain. Not truth. Not memories. Pain." She held his gaze. Sometimes they are the same thing. A servant entered with food, sensed the tension immediately, and placed the plates down in record silence. Grilled fish, rice scented with clove, stewed greens, the kind of meal designed to appear comforting without demanding comment. Juma waited until the servant left. Then he said, "Tell me about the night of the fire." Naledi did not move. Anyone else might have gasped, might have looked offended, confused, defensive. Naledi did none of that. She lifted her fork, cut into the fish, and asked calmly, "After all these years?" "Yes." "Why, because I'm asking." That made her set the fork down. At last. It was chaos, she said. Smoke everywhere. Staff screaming. "You were out of town." "Amahle." She stopped and lowered her eyes with practiced sorrow. Amahle was gone before anyone could reach her. "That's what I was told." Naledi looked up again. "Because that is what happened." Juma reached into his jacket and placed a photocopied page on the table between them. The hospital intake discrepancy. Naledi's face remained almost unreadable. Almost. "This says the body arrived before the ambulance was dispatched," he said. "How does that happen?" She glanced at the paper only briefly. "Administrative errors happen in emergencies." He laid down another page. "The missing forensic confirmation. And this. Maybe it was misplaced." Another page. "The camera failure report." And this, now Naledi's expression changed not into panic, but irritation. "You're doing exactly what grief does to men like you," she said quietly. "Turning paperwork into ghosts. Men like you." Juma felt the insult slide under his skin. "Men like me," he repeated. "Men who cannot accept helplessness." Naledi replied. "Men who would rather invent conspiracy than admit tragedy." Juma let out a low breath through his nose. Not quite laughter. Not yet anger. Something colder. "You sound prepared." Naledi sat straighter. Prepared for what your spiral I have lived beside it for years. There it was. A shift. Not sympathy now. Control. Juma looked at her and remembered every conversation after the fire, every time she had encouraged him to rest instead of ask, every time she had spoken on his behalf to lawyers' staff and the press because he had been too broken to function, every time she had told him some doors were better left closed. At the time he had called it devotion. What if it had been management? I saw a girl yesterday, he said. That landed, not dramatically. Naledi did not flinch backward or drop her glass, but something in her eyes tightened, then vanished. A girl, she repeated. In Makena Junction. Naledi said nothing. She looked like Amahle. Silence. Then softly, carefully, grief plays cruel tricks. Juma leaned forward. The scar on the wrist is a cruel trick too. Naledi held her breath for half a second too long. Juma saw it. And once seen, it could not be unseen. You remember the scar, he said. She was your daughter. Of course I remember. You remember it fast. Juma. He stood so suddenly that his chair scraped hard across the floor. The sound cracked through the room like a threat. Naledi remained seated, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her water glass. For the first time all evening, the mask was not fully steady. Do not use that tone with me, unless you are ready to hear mine, he said. Naledi rose slowly now, refusing to look smaller than him. And what tone is that? The one you use when you need someone to blame because you cannot bear your own failures. The words hit clean and cruel, because they were designed to. Juma's face hardened. What do you know about my failures? I know you weren't there that night. He froze. Naledi stepped closer, voice low and cutting. I know your daughter cried for you while you were in another city, closing another deal. I know your house was full of employees because your life had no room for family unless it was scheduled. I know grief made you dangerous to yourself, and someone had to keep this house standing. There was truth in that, which made it more vicious. Juma had no defense against the fact that he had not been there. He had spent years silently sentencing himself for it. Naledi knew that. She had reached directly for the wound he could never guard, but guilt did not erase evidence, and accusation did not answer questions. He lowered his voice. Where were you when the East Wing cameras went offline? Naledi stared at him. Excuse me. You heard me. Are you accusing me? I'm asking you. No, she snapped. Then immediately softened again, but too late. I was trying to save what could be saved. What exactly was that? Our family. Juma gave a thin, humorless smile. Which one? That finally broke the rhythm. Naledi's eyes flashed. A tiny movement, barely visible, but enough. He had touched something real, because beneath the silk, beneath the self-control, beneath the years of cultivated composure, there it was ambition, bruised by suspicion. Juma saw it, and Naledi saw that he saw it. They stood facing each other across a dinner neither had touched. Then a knock came at the door. Both turned. A maid entered halfway, visibly nervous. Sir, forgive me. Baraka says it is urgent. Naledi's head moved sharply toward Juma. He did not miss that either. Send him in, Juma said. Baraka entered with dust still on his shoes and a folded paper in his hand. His eyes flicked once toward Naledi, then back to Juma. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, which meant he was not sorry at all. What is it? Juma asked. Baraka handed him the note. It was an address. A clinic on the outskirts of the informal settlement. Below it, a single line. Nombuso asked for 1 hour. Alone. No police, no security. Juma read it twice. Naledi spoke first. Who is Nombuso? Neither man answered. That silence was answer enough. Naledi's voice sharpened. Juma. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. Dinner is over, he said. Then he walked out, leaving the untouched food. The silver, the polished table, and Naledi's composure cracking quietly behind him. An hour later, as night spread across the city, Juma sat beside Baraka in the dark sedan once more. The clinic address glowed faintly on his phone screen. He did not know whether Nombuso planned to confess, accuse Beg, or disappear. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty now. The poor woman in the slum was not the first liar in this story, and perhaps not even the most dangerous one. The clinic was barely a clinic. It stood at the edge of the settlement like something built from exhaustion and stubbornness. One concrete room, one rusted roof patched with corrugated tin, a flickering light above the door, a hand-painted sign promising treatment vaccinations and prayer in equal measure. Juma stepped out of the car and smelled bleach dust and rainwater trapped in broken gutters. Baraka stayed close. I can go in first, he said. Juma shook his head. No. If she asked for me, she gets me. Inside the waiting area was empty, except for 2 plastic chairs, a sleeping baby wrapped to her mother's back, and a young nurse writing in a torn ledger. She looked up, recognized money before identity, and straightened. She's in the back, the nurse said quietly. Only him. Baraka didn't like that. It showed. Juma handed him his phone and watch without a word, and walked down the narrow corridor alone. The room at the end was small and hot. A metal cabinet stood crooked in one corner. There was a treatment bed with cracked vinyl. A single fan turned above them with a sound like dry bones rubbing together. Nombuso stood by the window. She was not dressed like a woman expecting mercy. No performance, no tears prepared in advance, just a faded blue dress, tired eyes, and a spine held straight by force of will. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then Nombuso said, You should not have come near her like that. Juma shut the door behind him. You knew I would. I hoped grief had made you slower. He stared at her. You know too much about my grief for a stranger. Nombuso's mouth tightened. I was not a stranger the night your world burned. That landed hard. Juma took one step closer. Then start there. She looked past him to the closed door as if measuring how much danger had entered with him. If I speak, everything changes. It already has. No, she said. For you, yes. For me, it has been changing for 8 years. Juma's patience snapped at the edges. My daughter is alive. She has been alive while I buried an empty lie. Say what you called me here to say. Nombuso looked back at him then, and for the first time he saw something under the caution. Not fear. Contempt. Your daughter is ill, she said, because the people you trusted wanted her gone, and the people you never saw kept her breathing. The words struck him like an open hand. He took another step. Who? But instead of answering directly, Nombuso asked, Do you remember the woman who worked in the East Wing nursery? Small voice, limp in her left leg, braided grey hair. Juma searched his memory. A house full of staff, a life built on delegation. Faces blurred more easily than they should have. Then it came back. Mama Sade, he said. Nombuso nodded. My older sister. Juma went still. She worked for your family for 11 years, Nombuso continued. She knew Amahle's favorite songs. She knew which cup she liked for milk. She knew the child hated thunder and wanted 3 stories, not 2, before sleeping. She loved that girl more honestly than some blood relatives do. Juma swallowed. Mama Sade died in that fire, he said. Yes. The answer was flat, like a stone set down. Nombuso continued. She sent for me that night. I sold vegetables then just 2 roads from the service gate. She had asked me earlier to wait nearby because she was afraid. Afraid of what Nombuso held his gaze. Of Madame Naledi. The room seemed to shrink. Juma's voice lowered dangerously. Why? Because your daughter had heard something she should not have heard. A pulse beat at Juma's temple. What? Nombuso shook her head once. I did not know everything then, only fragments. Amahla had wandered into a room she was not meant to enter. She heard Madame Naledi arguing with Mr. Themba Nkube about inheritance papers, about timelines, about how some things would become easier once the girl was no longer between Kagiso and the future. My sister told me the child repeated those words later without understanding them. Madame Naledi heard her repeat them. Juma's hands curled into fists. That was not yet proof, but it was motive. Ugly, clear, human motive. Nombuso went on. That same evening, my sister said the house felt wrong. Staff were being moved around. The old steward Mandler was everywhere at once. People kept being sent away from the East Wing on small excuses. Then the power cut happened in part of the corridor. The cameras, Juma murmured. Nombuso nodded. Not long after, my sister heard shouting. Not panic. Controlled shouting. Ordered shouting. The kind rich people do when they already know what story they will tell after. Juma felt nausea rise. He had spent years imagining the fire as chaos, random destruction, bad luck, one cruel act of God. Now he was seeing design. When I reached the service gate, Nombuso said smoke was already rising. Staff were running. Some were really afraid. Some were pretending. My sister met me behind the laundry block with the child wrapped in a blanket. Juma stopped breathing for a moment. Amale was alive. She was unconscious, Nombuso replied. Coughing. Burn on the arm. Blood near the hairline, but alive. My sister told me, take her and do not bring her back tonight, not until he knows the truth. Hejuma asked, though he knew. You. His eyes burned. For years, he said, voice rough for years, I was told. No one reached her in time. Nombuso's face hardened. That is because your household decided what kind of truth your grief could handle. Juma turned away for a second, just enough to keep from exploding in a room too small to survive it. Then why didn't you come to me? He demanded. Why didn't you go to the police? To the press? To anyone? Nombuso let out a sharp, bitter breath. Because my sister died before dawn. Juma looked back. She went back in, Nombuso said. She said if she disappeared too, they would hunt for the child harder. She wanted to slow them down. Maybe she thought she could still expose them from inside. Maybe she thought loyalty would protect her. It didn't. Juma heard the fan creak above them. Nothing else. You think they killed her, he said. I think poor women who know too much do not die conveniently by accident around rich people. The sentence did not come from drama. It came from experience. And that made it worse. Nombuso moved to the cabinet, opened a rusted drawer, and took out a plastic envelope. She laid it on the bed between them. Inside was a half-burned gold pendant. Juma stared at it. A tiny sun. His knees nearly gave way. He reached into his pocket, slowly removed the velvet box he had carried since the night before, and opened it beside the envelope. The matching half lay inside. For one terrible holy second, the broken necklace became a bridge across 8 stolen years. Juma closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Nombuso was watching him without softness. This should have reached you long ago, she said. But every path led back to your house, and your house was poisoned. His throat tightened. So you hid her. I kept her alive. You let her believe she was no one. Nombuso's gaze flashed. No. I let her become someone outside the reach of people who wanted her erased. That hit him because he could not fully deny it. Still, anger surged up through the grief. She sold fruit in the street. Yes. She slept in that place. Yes. She starved. Nombuso took one step toward him now, and her voice dropped low and fierce. And she lived. Silence cracked between them. She lived? Nombuso repeated. Do you understand me now? She lived. On nights when rain came through the roof, she lived. On days when I had to choose between medicine and food, she lived. When the boy Teboho collapsed with fever and she sat awake, wiping his face because I was working. She lived. When men came asking questions I knew were not innocent, we moved and she lived. I did not give her luxury. I gave her tomorrow. Juma had no answer ready for that, because truth had split into pieces and none of them were clean. He had lost a daughter. This woman had carried that loss for him, but she had also hidden the living child from her father. Both things could be true at once, and he hated that. What did she know? He asked at last. How much have you told her? Only that she was found after a fire, and that some people with money cannot be trusted. Juma laughed once bitterly. A fair lesson. Nombuso ignored that. When she was younger, she remembered your name in fragments. A house with too much glass. A woman singing near a piano. A man who smelled like cedar and rain. She looked at him. That part, I think, was you. Juma turned his face away because the room suddenly had too little air. Then Nombuso said the one thing he was not prepared for. I tried to reach you 3 times. He looked back sharply. What, once through a church office? Once through a journalist who was paid to lose interest? Once through a clerk in your legal department? Her mouth twisted. Each time someone from your circle found me first, who I never saw the same face twice, but the message was always the same: stop asking questions about the dead girl. The dead girl. Juma felt something settle inside him then. Not grief, not rage. Certainty. Naledi had not merely benefited from Amahle's disappearance. She had maintained it. He stepped closer to Nombuso's voice, steady now, in a way it had not been all night. I need proof, he said. You have proof. I need the kind the law cannot laugh at. Nombuso held his stare for a long moment. Then she nodded once. There is more. From inside her dress, tucked beneath the sleeve hem, she pulled out a folded paper, so worn it looked like it had survived war. She placed it in his hand. A page torn from an old household notepad. Half burned at one edge. On it, in hurried writing, were words that made his blood turn cold. Keep the child quiet tonight. If Juma returns early, delay him. Mandla knows what to do. Njuma read it twice, then a third time. The handwriting was unmistakable. Naledi's. He lifted his eyes slowly. Nombuso's face was grim. My sister pushed that into the blanket before she gave me the child. Juma's jaw locked so hard it hurt. The door behind him rattled softly. Baraka's knock. One time. Warning, not interruption. Juma folded the note with deadly care. When I walk out of here, he said, everything changes. Nombuso crossed her arms. For her, it changes only if you become the kind of father worth finding. The words should have angered him. Instead, they entered him like judgment. He put the pendant back into the envelope, then stopped and pushed it toward her. You keep this for now. Nombuso frowned. Why? Because if my house is as poisoned as you say, then nothing connected to Amahle is safe there yet. He turned toward the door, then paused. Without facing her, he said, Thank you for keeping her alive. Nombuso did not answer for several seconds. When she finally did, her voice was quiet and exhausted. Do not thank me too early, Juma Dlamini. The people who stole her once may try again. He opened the door. Baraka straightened instantly. One look at Juma's face was enough. The driver asked no questions until they were back in the car. Then, as the clinic disappeared behind them, and the city lights stretched ahead like a field of distant fire, Baraka said, "Is it true?" Juma stared into the dark. "Yes." Baraka gripped the wheel harder. "About the girl?" "Yes, and Madame Naledi." Juma reached into his pocket and touched the folded note. His voice came out like iron. "She didn't just lie to me." He looked up at the black road ahead. "She helped bury my daughter while she was still breathing." Juma did not go home immediately. He told Baraka to keep driving. The city at night looked like two nations stitched together with lies. Glass towers shone above darkness. Restaurants overflowed with laughter and polished cutlery, while only streets-away generators coughed beside flooded alleys and children slept behind locked kiosks. Wealth glimmered. Need endured. And somewhere between the two, Juma sat in the back seat of a plain sedan with a folded note in his pocket, and the ruins of his old life already collapsing in his mind. Baraka glanced at him through the mirror. "Where to?" Juma looked out at the passing lights. Nowhere public, nowhere expected. So Baraka drove toward the industrial edge of the city where warehouses slept behind chain-link fences, and the roads were wide enough for secrets. He finally pulled into the shadow of an abandoned freight yard and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt earned. Juma took out Naledi's note again. "Keep the child quiet tonight. If Juma returns early, delay him. Mandla knows what to do." And he had read those lines at least 20 times since leaving the clinic, and each time they changed shape inside him. At first they were evidence, then betrayal, then a knife. Now they had become something colder. A map. Not of everything that had happened, but of everything that had been hidden in plain sight. Baraka turned slightly in his seat. "What are you thinking, that I married a woman who knew how to arrange grief like furniture?" Baraka said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say to that. Juma leaned back and closed his eyes. He remembered the years after the fire in sharp fragments. Naledi bringing him signed documents when he could barely read. Naledi telling the staff to lower their voices. Naledi instructing reporters to stay away from the funeral gates. Naledi insisting that Amahle's room be closed until your heart is stronger. Naledi standing beside him at the memorial in white, not black, because she said black would make the press feed on the image. At the time he had thought, "She is protecting us." Now he understood. She had been curating the scene. "What do we do first?" Baraka asked. Juma opened his eyes. "We do not confront her yet." Baraka frowned. "Sir, with that note." "With that note," Juma cut in. "I have enough to make her dangerous, not enough to destroy her." Baraka knew he was right. Naledi had influence allies and years of preparation. One warning and she could burn documents, move money. Silence, Mandla pressure Nakub and build 3 new lies before sunrise. "We need more," Juma said. "Hard records, witnesses who can still be reached, financial trails, anything linking Naledi Mandla and Nkub to that night, and the years after." Baraka nodded. And Amahle. The name hit differently now that it had been confirmed. Heavy. Sacred, fragile. Juma looked back toward the city. "That is the second war." Baraka waited. "She is alive," Juma said quietly. "But she is not waiting in some room to be rescued. She has a life. She has loyalties. She has reasons to hate men like me." "Men like you?" Baraka asked carefully. "Powerful men who arrive late and call it love." Baraka let that sit between them. At last he said, "Then you will have to show her something different." Juma almost laughed, but there was no humor in him tonight. I don't even know where to start. With honesty, Baraka said. The word landed with almost embarrassing force because it was exactly what Zuri had demanded in the street. Come back with honesty, not money, not promises, not authority, honesty. Juma rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly feeling the exhaustion in his bones. Take me back to Makena Junction. Baraka turned fully now. Tonight? Yes. That is a mistake. I know. And you still want to do it? Juma stared ahead. If I wait until morning, I'll become the kind of man who keeps postponing truth until it dies again. Baraka held his gaze in the mirror for 1 second, then started the engine. They reached the slum a little before 10. Makena Junction at night was another world. The daytime noise had thinned, but not vanished. Kerosene lamps burned in doorways. Cooking smoke drifted low. Radios muttered from cramped rooms. Somewhere a couple shouted. Somewhere else people laughed too loudly for their lives to be easy. The streets were darker now, but not quieter. Survival had a night shift too. Baraka parked 2 lanes away from the fruit stalls. She may not want to see you, he said. I know. She may say worse things than you deserve. Juma opened the door. I know that too. Nombuzo's shack stood at the far end of a narrow passage where the mud had dried into broken ridges. Juma walked alone the last stretch. Children playing cards under a lamp looked up and went silent as he passed. An old man on a stool watched him with open suspicion. Nothing in this place trusted clean shoes. When Juma reached the doorway, he saw the light before he saw the people. A single lantern. 3 shadows. He stopped. Inside, Tebaho lay asleep on a thin mattress near the wall, coughing even in his dreams. Nombuso sat on a low stool mending a torn shirt by hand. And Zuri Amahle sat beside the doorway with a bowl in her lap, peeling boiled cassava in careful silence. She looked up first. No surprise showed on her face. Only irritation. As if she had expected trouble to arrive eventually, and was merely annoyed by its timing. You again, she said. Juma stood in the doorway, suddenly aware that the room behind her contained more reality than his mansion had held in years. I said I'd come back. Yes, she replied. But I also said come back with honesty. Nombuso set the shirt down. You should not be here. She deserves to hear something from me, Juma said. Zuri's gaze sharpened. Deserves what Juma looked at Nombuso. Nombuso looked back with equal firmness. No rescue would come from her. If he spoke, he would speak alone. Good. He stepped just inside. My name is Juma Dlamini. Zuri snorted softly. I know who you are now. Rich man. Big houses. Big projects. People in this city say your name like it opens doors. It does? Then why are you here? Because I am your father. The words rose and stuck. Too abrupt. Too selfish. Too much like a man trying to fix 8 stolen years with 1 sentence. He swallowed and tried again. Because I believe something was stolen from both of us. That made her stop peeling. Nombuzo did not move, but Juma felt her attention tighten. What thing? Zuri asked. The truth. She gave him a hard look. That sounds like a rich person's answer. Pretty words, no food. Juma accepted that hit without defense. Then I'll make it plain. He crouched slightly, not enough to pretend equality, just enough not to tower over her. When you were very small, he said, there was a fire. I was told you died in it. The room went still. Zuri's fingers tightened around the knife she was using to peel cassava. Juma kept his voice steady. Yesterday when I saw you on the roadside, I thought grief was playing a trick on me. Then I started looking at old records. They were wrong. More than wrong. They were built to keep me from asking questions. Zuri stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I think your life began in my house. Nombuso closed her eyes briefly, as if a long-delayed moment had finally arrived and she hated it for being necessary. Zuri looked from Juma to Nombuso. Back to Juma. "No," she said first. Then louder. "No. Don't do that." Juma didn't move. "Don't come into this house and say crazy things because you feel guilty about poor people," she snapped. "I'm not your charity, I know." "Then what? You saw me selling oranges, and suddenly your heart became holy." The words cut, but less than her eyes did. There was no softness in them, only defense built from experience. "I'm not here out of pity," he said. "Then why now?" she demanded, rising to her feet. "Why after all these years? Why not when I was hungry? Why not when Teboho needed medicine? Why not when boys threw stones at our stall and the police chased us because street children ruin the city's image? Why now?" Her voice had risen, but it did not break. That made it more devastating. She had asked these questions in different forms her whole life, even without knowing to whom they belonged. Juma forced himself not to retreat into the comfort of explanation. "Because he said I didn't know you were alive." Zuri laughed once, bitter and unbelieving. "Convenient? I know it sounds that way. It sounds worse than that." He nodded. "It does." That slowed her more than defense would have. People expected the rich to argue. Confession unsettled them. Nombuso stood then, moving between them just enough to protect without interrupting. "Ama." She stopped herself too late. The room changed. Zuri turned sharply. "What did you just say?" Nombuso froze. Juma felt his pulse thunder once in his ears. Zuri's face went pale beneath the dust and lantern light. "What did you call me?" Nombuso's lips parted. No sound came out. Juma could have taken the moment, forced it, claimed it. Instead, he stayed still. Zuri looked between them again, and something deep under her anger began to stir. Not belief, not yet, but terror at the shape of what might be true. "My name is Zuri," she said, but now it sounded like a plea, more than a fact. Nombuso's eyes filled before her voice did. "It is," she said softly. "And once, before that, you were called Amale." The bowl slipped from Zuri's hands and hit the floor. Cassava scattered across the dirt. Teboho woke with a cough. No one moved to pick up anything. Zuri stepped back once, shaking her head. "No." Then again. "No, no, no." Juma wanted to reach for her. He did not, because he understood something at that moment with painful clarity. Finding her had been the easy part. This standing in front of the living wound of her stolen identity, this was where fatherhood would begin or fail. Zuri looked at Nombuso, eyes blazing with hurt. "You lied to me." Nombuso's voice trembled. "I kept you alive. That is not the same thing." "No," Nombuso said, tears slipping free now. "It isn't." Zuri turned toward Juma next, and the anguish in her face was almost unbearable. "And you?" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence, because she did not yet know what word to use for him. Neither did he, so he answered the question she could not ask. "I came too late," he said quietly, "but I'm here now." She stared at him as if those words were both everything and nothing. Then she backed away from both of them, grabbed her shawl from the wall, and fled into the night. Juma moved instantly. Nombuso grabbed his arm with startling force. "No. She's alone. She needs air before she needs answers." Juma looked at the dark doorway where his daughter had vanished. Every instinct in him screamed to follow. But deep down he knew Nombuso was right. You could not chase a child through the collapse of her own past and call it rescue. So he stood there unmoving, breathing hard, while Teboho coughed on the mattress and the lantern flame trembled and the room filled with the cost of truth. After a long silence, Nombuso let go of his arm. "She will hate me tonight," she whispered. Juma kept staring at the doorway. She may hate both of us, he said. Nombuso nodded through tears. Then perhaps that means she finally knows enough to choose for herself. Juma did not answer, because out in the dark, somewhere beyond the alley and the lamps and the cracked roads, his daughter was running with a broken name in her chest, and for the first time in 8 years he could not blame fate for that pain. Only people. Amahle did not return that night. By dawn, Makena Junction already knew something had happened. In places like that, truth never arrived whole. It traveled in fragments through cooking fires, through children running errands, through women washing clothes beside open drains, through men pretending not to listen while hearing everything. By sunrise, 3 versions of the story were moving through the slum at once. A rich man had come for a girl. A dead child had come back. A mother had been exposed as a liar. None of them were fully right. All of them were dangerous. Juma had not slept. He remained in the parked sedan near the main road until the sky turned from black to violet to pale gold. Baraka brought him tea from a roadside stall in a chipped plastic cup. Juma drank it without tasting it. Every few minutes his eyes lifted toward the maze of alleys, as if Amahle might suddenly emerge from them, with clarity in her face and forgiveness in her voice. She did not. "You should go home and change," Baraka said around sunrise. "No. You have meetings scheduled. They can die." Baraka gave him a look. "Some of them may deserve to. But if you vanish completely, Naledi will know something is wrong." That reached him. Juma leaned back and rubbed his eyes. She already knows. She suspects Baraka corrected. There is a difference. Suspicion makes people cautious. Certainty makes them destructive. Juma stared ahead. That was true. And Naledi was not the kind of woman who panicked loudly. She would panic precisely, quietly, efficiently. If she confirmed that Amahle was alive and that Juma was closing in, she would move faster than grief law or conscience. "Then I go home," Juma said. But not for long. Before they left, Nombuso came to the roadside alone. She looked even older in the morning light. One night of truth had taken years from her face, or perhaps it had simply stopped hiding them. "No sign of her?" Juma asked. Nombuso shook her head. "Some girls saw her walking toward the railway line after midnight. That is all." Juma's chest tightened. "Alone?" "Yes." He stepped forward. "Why did you let her go?" Nombuso's tired eyes flashed with anger. "Do not speak to me as if I control storms. She is not a child you can lock in a room until she calms down. She is still a child. She is a child who learned long ago that the world breaks first and explains later." The words hit because they were true. Juma looked away. Nombuso continued lower now, exhaustion softening the edges of her fury. "She will come back when hunger, anger, or love pulls her. I do not know which one will win first." Juma swallowed. "If she comes back, tell her I want to talk." "I know." He hesitated. "Will you?" Nombuso held his gaze. "Yes. But not because you deserve it. Because she deserves all the truth now." That was as close to cooperation as he was going to get. By 8 o'clock, Juma was back at the estate. The mansion looked exactly as it always had: smooth walls, guarded gates, imported palms bending slightly in the morning wind. Money had a way of pretending that nothing had changed. But inside Juma, every corridor now seemed wired with old deceit. Naledi was in the breakfast room. She wore pale blue and read financial briefs like a queen reviewing tribute. Kagiso, her son, sat across from her, scrolling through his phone with the arrogance of a young man who had never been made to earn the floor beneath his shoes. He looked up when Juma entered. Father Kagiso said. The word twisted oddly now. Juma had never formally adopted him, but he had fed his schools, his cars, his habits, his future. He had let the boy grow under his roof while a mahle grew in dust. Naledi folded the paper. You were out early. Juma took his seat with measured calm. I had business. Kahiso smirked without looking up fully. At the slums, silence dropped hard. Naledi's head turned slowly toward her son. Too slowly. Juma saw it instantly. He looked at Kagiso. What did you say? The young man realized too late that he had spoken carelessly. Nothing. No. Say it again. Kagiso shrugged, attempting indifference. People saw your car near Makena Junction. News travels. I assumed you were inspecting land. Juma watched him. Not the words, the face behind them. Kagiso had always been too smooth for innocence, too aware of status, too hungry for the shortcuts wealth offered. Juma had once blamed the mother for that. Now he wondered how much training was involved. Interesting assumption, Juma said. Naledi stepped in at once, elegant as ever. Kagiso, leave us. He opened his mouth to resist thought better of it and stood. But as he passed Juma, the young man added quietly, Be careful what ghosts you chase, father. Some of them ruin the living. Then he walked out. Juma did not move for several seconds. Naledi broke first. He is immature. He is informed. He hears things. That is not the same. Juma looked at her. He knew where I was. Naledi lifted her coffee cup. Half the city knows where you are at any given hour. That is the cost of being you. A good answer. Too good. Juma rose. Come to the study. Naledi set the cup down. Is that a request? No. She joined him 3 minutes later. The room still bore traces of the night he had ripped his grief open, files stacked in hard-edged piles, drawers not fully shut, the portrait of a mahle repositioned on the desk. Naledi noticed everything. He could tell from the way her eyes moved. Juma closed the door. Then he placed Naledi's handwritten note on the desk between them. He said nothing. He did not need to. For the first time since all this began, her face truly emptied. No performance, no layered response, no ready sorrow, just a single raw second of exposed recognition. Then it vanished. That could be anything, she said. Juma almost admired the speed of recovery. It is your handwriting. It resembles my handwriting. It was found wrapped with my daughter the night of the fire. Naledi's gaze sharpened. Your daughter is dead. The lie sounded different now. Not holy, not tragic, mechanical. No, Juma said. She is not. He watched for the impact. It came as stillness, not shock. That was answer enough. You knew, he said softly. Naledi laughed once, low and dangerous. Careful. You knew. Careful, Juma. I found her. Now Naledi did move. She stepped toward him with sudden force, all softness gone. Then you are more foolish than I thought, she hissed. If there is some street girl playing dress-up with your guilt, do not drag this family into madness. This family, he said. You mean your son's inheritance? Her eyes flashed. There. The nerve. You think like a sentimental old man, she snapped. Do you know what empires require control, timing, sacrifice? Juma stared at her. She realized too late how much she had revealed. But pride was rising now, loosening her caution. She was a child, Juma said. She was an obstacle, Naledi replied. The words entered the room like poison. For one impossible second, neither of them moved. Juma felt his own heartbeat in his throat. Not because he doubted what he had heard, because hearing it aloud made murder sound almost administrative. Naledi saw his horror and straightened, gathering herself again. I did not say I harmed her, she said coldly. I said she complicated everything. You wrote that Mandla knew what to do. That note proves nothing. It proves intent. It proves fear, Naledi shot back. Fear that a grieving, unstable man would destroy everything after the fire. Fear that loose staff would create scandal. Fear that business enemies would feast on weakness. You think power waits kindly while people mourn. Juma stepped closer. You're not explaining yourself. You're defending strategy. Because someone had to think while you bled. He almost struck the desk. Almost. Instead, he leaned in so close that she could see the hatred in his restraint. She lived in the slums. Naledi's mouth tightened. Did you hear me? He said. She sold fruit by the roadside. She fed a sick child before feeding herself. She wore broken shoes while you hosted charity dinners in silk. For the first time, something like discomfort flickered across Naledi's face. Not guilt. Never that. Something uglier. Disgust at imperfection. I did what was necessary, she said. Juma stared at her as if a human face had peeled off and revealed machinery. No, he replied. You did what benefited you. A knock came. Baraka entered without waiting for permission. Good. Urgency was written across his face. What is it? Juma asked. Baraka ignored Naledi completely. Mandla is gone. Juma's pulse kicked. Gone where he cleared his room at dawn. One bag missing. Staff say he received a phone call in the night and left before breakfast. Naledi did not turn her head, but Juma felt her attention sharpen like a blade. Find him, Juma said. Baraka nodded once. There's more. A former estate guard, the one who worked East Wing rotation the year of the fire, I tracked him through an old payroll address. He's alive. He's hiding in Mafula Township. Juma stepped around the desk. Take me. Baraka hesitated just for a fraction. He says he kept something. Something from that night. Naledi's control cracked, not loudly but enough. This is absurd. Juma faced her. No, he said. Absurd was lighting candles for a dead child while she grew up begging under my name. Then he left. The drive to Mafula took less than an hour, but it felt longer because the city seemed to resist revelation. Traffic choked every junction. Street vendors hammered on windows, rain threatened but never fell. Inside the car, Juma kept seeing Naledi's face when she said, obstacle. Not daughter. Not child. Obstacle. By the time they reached the township, his grief had transformed again. It was no longer just grief for Amahle. It was grief for the man he had been, blind, proud, absent, and easy to manage. The former guard lived in a crumbling row house behind a welding shop. His name was Elias. Thin grey at the temples, one eye milky from an old injury. He opened the door only after Baraka gave a phrase they had agreed on over the phone. When Elias saw Juma, fear and shame moved across his face together. Sir, he said. Juma did not waste time. You kept something. Elias nodded and led them inside. From beneath a mattress he pulled out an old plastic packet wrapped in cloth. Inside lay two things, a scorched access card for the East Wing security corridor, and a silver flash drive. Juma frowned. What is this? Elias swallowed. A backup copy. Partial. I made it before they wiped the server. Baraka looked at him sharply. You said the logs were gone. They are. This is not the server. Elias licked dry lips. It's camera spillover from a maintenance route. Bad angle. No sound. But it shows enough. Juma's blood ran cold, enough to show what he asked. Elias looked at him, voice barely above a whisper. Enough to show Madame Naledi entering the East Wing with Mandla, minutes before the fire started. The room went silent. Then Elias added the sentence that changed the shape of everything once again, and enough to show she was not alone. Juma's eyes narrowed. Who was with them? Elias shook his head. Not a staff member. He pointed to the flash drive. It shows Kagiso. For a long moment, nobody in the room breathed. The welding shop outside kept clanging. A radio somewhere nearby crackled through static. A child laughed in the alley, then ran off. Life continued with its usual disrespect for revelation. Inside the cramped room, Juma stood motionless, staring at the flash drive in Elias's trembling hand, as if it were not plastic and metal, but a detonator. Kagiso, he said at last. Elias lowered his eyes. Yes, sir. No. Juma's voice hardened. Look at me and say exactly what you saw. Elias obeyed, though fear was all over him now. I saw Madame Naledi enter the East Wing corridor with Mandla. A few minutes later, young Master Kagiso appeared in the frame. He was older than a child should have been to be wandering there by accident, but young enough that I told myself he had no idea what was happening. Juma's jaw locked. How old? 12? Maybe 13. Baraka took the flash drive carefully. And you never gave this to the police? Elias laughed once, bitterly. Police, I was a guard, not a fool. By dawn, I had already been paid to forget what I saw. By noon, another man told me forgetting was the only reason my family would keep breathing. Juma stepped closer. Who told you that Mandla first? Then Mr. Nakub's clerk visited me. He said there had been a tragedy, that the family needed unity, and that poor men often confuse smoke with memory. He gave me money. Elias swallowed. I took it. Shame sat heavily on the last words. Juma did not comfort him. Not because he felt nothing, but because too many people had taken money while his daughter disappeared into hunger. Why keep the copy? Juma asked. Elias looked at him with one good eye. Because a man can be bought into silence. He cannot always buy sleep. That answer at least sounded honest. Baraka took out a laptop from the worn satchel he had started carrying since this nightmare began. He placed it on the small table, inserted the flash drive, and opened the file. The footage was grainy, black and white. No sound. A maintenance camera from an intersecting service corridor partly angled toward the East Wing junction. The timestamp glowed weakly in one corner. The hallway looked exactly as Juma remembered it. Expensive wallpaper, polished flooring, framed mirrors, the kind of carefully designed luxury that assumed safety as a birthright. Then movement. Naledi entered first. Even in low resolution, her posture was unmistakable. Straight spine, measured pace, head lifted slightly, as if she owned the silence ahead of her. Mandla followed, carrying something long and dark in his hands. He kept glancing behind him. Juma's fingers curled against his palm. The footage rolled on. For several seconds, nothing else happened. Then another figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Smaller, restless. Kagiso. Young, yes, but not confused, not wandering. He moved with purpose, too cautious for innocence, too familiar with the corridor to be lost. He reached Naledi. She turned. Even without sound, the body language was clear. She told him something sharp. Kagiso gestured back with agitation. Mandla stepped between them. Naledi pointed down the corridor toward the nursery wing, and then the three of them disappeared from view. 21 seconds later, the lights flickered. After that, smoke began to creep across the top corner of the frame. No one spoke. Baraka paused the video. Elias stood like a man awaiting judgment. Juma felt as if the floor had moved beneath him. Kagiso, not merely a beneficiary of the crime, present, part of the architecture of that night. Maybe used, maybe manipulated, maybe already learning from his mother how power worked when morality became inconvenient. What happened after that? Juma asked. Elias licked his lips. A little later, Mandla came back through the frame alone, running. Then staff started shouting. Then smoke filled the corridor. The rest is broken footage. Does Amahle appear anywhere, number Mamasade? Elias shook his head. Juma closed the laptop halfway, then opened it again immediately as if shutting it would make it less real. Baraka spoke carefully. "This is strong, but not complete." "I know," Juma said. "Naledi entering the corridor before the fire. Kagiso with her, Mandla assisting." It was explosive, but a defense lawyer could still carve holes into it. They would say Naledi was checking on the child. They would say Kagiso followed by accident. They would say Mandla was carrying safety equipment, linens, anything. Without sound, without the full corridor, without the ignition itself, it was devastating morally, and still contestable legally. Juma hated that truth, because truth should not have needed better lighting. He turned to Elias. Who else knew this existed? No one. No one at all. Elias hesitated. Juma's gaze sharpened. There was one more thing, Elias admitted. The backup copied automatically from a maintenance sync. I destroyed the terminal, but the technician who helped install the bypass route might know it ever existed. Name: Solomon Pekizizwe. He left the company years ago. Last I heard, he repairs electronics in Old Port Market. Baraka nodded, already storing it. Juma shut the laptop fully now. "You're coming with us." Elias recoiled. "Sir, I can't." "You can," Juma said. "Or you can wait here for Naledi's people to realize you still breathe usefully." That ended the argument. An hour later, they were back in the car with Elias crouched low in the back seat like a hunted man. Baraka drove toward Old Port while Juma called no one and answered nothing. His phone vibrated repeatedly with missed meetings. Board requests 2 calls from Naledi and 1 message from Kagiso. "We need to talk before you make a mistake." Juma read it once and deleted nothing. Mistake. The arrogance of it almost made him smile. By midday, Old Port was a living machine of noise and compression. Stalls sold spare wires, cracked screens, stolen remotes, batteries, bootleg memory cards, old radios, and dead televisions waiting for resurrection. Men shouted prices over each other, soldering smoke mixed with sweat and sea air. It was the kind of place where broken things got second lives. Appropriate, Juma thought grimly. Solomon Piekizizwe was easy to find once Baraka asked the right boys. He worked under a patched canopy behind stacks of old monitors, wearing magnifying lenses over his eyes and repairing a radio with the gentleness of a surgeon. He looked up as they approached. Then he saw Elias, and everything in his face changed. "No," Solomon said quietly. No, I left that life behind." Juma stepped in before he could run. "Then help me end it properly." Solomon tried to keep his hands steady. Failed. "I don't know what you think." "I know," he said. "I think Juma replied that 8 years ago you helped install an alternate sync route on my home security system, and someone used it to keep footage off the main server." Solomon's silence answered. Baraka lowered his voice. "We're not here to hand you over. We're here because a girl was stolen from her father while powerful people protected themselves." That shook him. Not because he doubted it, because he had likely always suspected it. Solomon removed the lens frame from his face and rubbed his eyes. "I didn't know about a girl. Mandla said Madame Naledi wanted private redundancy for sensitive meetings. Rich people always say things like that. Privacy, security, reputation. They dress dirt in expensive words." "Did the alternate sync route store elsewhere?" Juma asked. Solomon nodded reluctantly. Short-term cash, yes, meant for maintenance only, but if the terminal wasn't manually purged, fragments could survive in cold archive. Where Solomon gave him a long look. "At Ncube's old satellite office." Juma's expression hardened. "The lawyer, yes. The company didn't trust in-house technicians. Legal kept shadow copies for risk control." That was the phrase. Baraka muttered under his breath. "Of course it was." Juma took 1 step closer. "Can you access it?" Solomon hesitated too long. "Can you?" Juma repeated. "Yes," he admitted. "Maybe. If the drives weren't destroyed, then you're coming too." By late afternoon, the 3 men and 1 frightened witness stood across the street from an old office building with tinted windows and fading signage bearing the name of Themba Nkubi and Associates. The place looked half abandoned, but Juma knew better than to trust decay. Rot often hid best behind neglect. Baraka turned in his seat. "We should wait until dark." "No," Juma said. "Sir, if Nkubi has heard anything from Naledi, those drives may already be burning." Elias looked sick. Solomon looked ready to bolt. Baraka looked like a man calculating how many disasters could fit into one day. But he started the engine again. They entered through the rear service door using a key card Solomon still carried from years ago, though he swore he had forgotten it was in his wallet. Inside the building smelled like paper mildew and old money. Emergency lights glowed dimly in the corridors. The satellite archive room was on the 2nd floor. Locked. Solomon worked the panel with shaking hands while Baraka kept watch. The lock clicked. Inside were old cabinets, dead servers, labeled backup units, and 2 standing racks covered in dust. Juma had never in his life felt so close to both justice and collapse. Solomon moved fast now, driven by either fear or redemption. He found the cold storage bank and began checking labels. Then stopped. His face drained. What Juma asked. Solomon pointed. Several slots were empty, drives removed recently. Baraka cursed softly. Juma stepped forward and grabbed the inventory sheet clipped to the rack. 4 archive units from the week of the fire were gone. 1 remained. Just 1. Solomon inserted it into a service dock. The system took an eternity to wake. When it finally did file, directories appeared corrupted, fragmented, but readable enough to search. Then 1 folder opened. East Wing Ox Cache. Juma felt his pulse slam. There were 6 files inside, 5 broken, 1 intact. Solomon opened it. Unlike Elias's clip, this one had sound, and a clearer angle, still partial, but enough to show the nursery corridor entrance. The screen flickered. Naledi appeared. Mandla beside her. Kagiso behind them. Voices crackled through static. "Only needs to be frightened," Naledi was saying. Then Kagiso's younger voice, tense and uncertain. "What if he finds out?" Naledi answered, with chilling calm. "He won't. Not if everyone remembers what matters." Juma went cold. The video continued. A child's voice sounded faintly from off-camera. "Amahle. Where is Mama Sade?" Mandla moved out of frame. Then the picture shook. A struggle. A gasp. Naledi's voice sharper now. "Take her." The file glitched. Smoke burst across the corridor. The sound distorted. Then, just before the video died, another voice screamed from somewhere unseen. Not Amahle. A woman. "Run with the child, Mama Sade." The screen froze. No one in the room moved. Baraka was the first to speak, voice low with fury. "This is enough." Juma did not answer, because the video had given him what he needed for the law, but it had also given him something worse. He now knew that Kagiso had heard enough to understand fear. And Naledi had spoken like a woman, not improvising under chaos, but managing an operation. Then a sound came from the hallway outside. Footsteps, more than 1 set. Baraka turned sharply. Too late. The door slammed shut behind them, and a male voice called from the other side. "Mr. Dlamini," it said smoothly. "You really should have stayed, grieving." Juma knew the voice instantly. Themba Nkubi. The room went dead silent. Not the silence of peace. The silence of a trap finally announcing itself. Baraka moved first. He crossed in front of Juma by instinct, positioning himself between the door and the men inside the archive room. Elias stumbled backward into a filing cabinet. Solomon nearly dropped the service dock. The monitor still glowed with the frozen frame of smoke, shadow, and betrayal. Outside the locked door, Themba Nkubi let out a soft, disappointed sigh. "You have always been clever in business, Juma," he said through the wood. "It is unfortunate that grief has made you reckless." Juma did not raise his voice. "Open the door." A low chuckle came back. "So you can pretend this is still a conversation between gentlemen?" Baraka's eyes moved quickly across the room. One door, no windows big enough for escape, one rusted air vent, two heavy metal cabinets, old office weak walls perhaps, but not weak enough for miracles. "How many?" Juma asked quietly. Baraka listened. "At least 3. Maybe 4. Elias whispered, "They'll kill us." "No," Juma said, gaze fixed on the door. "If they wanted us dead, they wouldn't be talking." That was true. Murder made noise. Exposure needed management first. Nkube spoke again, smooth and maddeningly calm. "I suggest you all step away from the terminal, particularly the witnesses. I am trying to prevent this from becoming uglier than it already is." Juma stared at the frozen image on the monitor. Naledi in the corridor, Kagiso behind her, smoke swallowing truth by inches. For 8 years, Nkube had hidden behind signatures and condolences, behind tasteful language and legal procedure. Men like him never lit the fire. They only ensured the flames had paperwork. Baraka Juma said, "Yes, copy everything." Baraka nodded once and moved to the terminal. Nkube heard enough movement to understand. "Do not test me." Juma stepped toward the door. "You protected a child's disappearance. I protected a family empire. You protected thieves. I protected continuity," Nkube replied, "which, unlike innocence, has actual market value. That sentence might have been laughable in another universe. Here it was simply honest." Juma's voice turned colder. "You helped them bury my daughter." There was a pause outside. Then Nkube said, "No. I helped a broken situation settle into something survivable." Juma's hand flexed at his side. Survivable. For whom? Not for Amahle. Not for Mama Sade. Not for Nombuso. Not for the father who lit candles over an empty grave, while parasites in tailored suits guided his mourning toward convenience. Baraka worked quickly at the terminal. "I need 3 more minutes." "You don't have 3," Nkube said through the door. A metal scrape followed. Something at the handle. "Move!" Baraka snapped. Juma pulled one of the filing cabinets with him. Elias, shaking badly, helped. Together they shoved it across the floor until it jammed hard against the door just as the handle jolted. A heavy impact came from outside. Then another. The door shook but held. Solomon looked ready to faint. "This is insane." "No," Juma said. "This is overdue." Baraka kept copying files, his face set like stone. 2 minutes. Another slam hit the door. Dust drifted from the frame. Nkube's voice lost some silk now. "Think carefully, Juma. If this reaches the press before the courts, they will turn your daughter into spectacle. If it reaches the courts before we speak, your entire corporation becomes a battlefield. Shareholders will panic. Regulators will swarm. Your enemies will feed." Juma answered without hesitation. "Let them." Silence. Not because Nkube had no response, because men like him rarely heard that answer from men like Juma. "Interesting," Nkube said at last. "So fatherhood has finally become more important than power." Juma looked at the frozen image of Amahle's corridor. "No," he said, "it always was. I was just blind enough to confuse the order." That hit some nerve outside, though. Nkube masked it quickly. Another impact. Louder. The top hinge groaned. Baraka pulled a small drive free and handed it to Juma. "Got it. Main file and directories. Partial backups, too." Juma took it and slipped it into the inner lining of his jacket. "Can you send it remotely?" he asked. "No signal here strong enough. Walls too thick. Then we walk it out." Elias made a broken sound. "Walk out past them." Juma turned to him. "You kept that first copy because guilt finally outgrew fear. Decide now whether you want to live as the man who hid or the man who testified." Elias stared at him, trembling. Then, very faintly, he nodded. "Good enough." The next hit splintered the inner panel of the door. Baraka moved fast, grabbing a metal rod from the dismantled server rack. Juma took another. Solomon armed himself with nothing more than a broken chair leg. Elias clutched the service dock like a child holding a prayer. "This is absurd," Solomon muttered again. Baraka glanced at him. "You're right. So survive it." The lock finally gave. The door burst inward against the cabinet, leaving just enough gap for one body to force through. The first man tried. Baraka swung before he had both feet inside. The metal rod cracked against the intruder's shoulder. He howled and fell back into the corridor. A second man shoved behind him, trying to push the cabinet aside. Juma drove his own rod forward into the gap, catching the man in the ribs. Chaos erupted, cursing, scuffling boots scraping tile. Then Ncube's voice, sharper now. "Enough, stop!" The corridor fell still, except for ragged breathing. "Mr. Dlamini," Ncube said, tone stripped nearly bare. "This is becoming criminal." Juma almost smiled. "Now you care about crime." No answer. Then another voice came from outside. Young, male, tense. "Kagiso is gone." Everything inside Juma froze. "What?" Ncube snapped. "He left the house an hour ago. Madam Naledi can't reach him." The air changed immediately. Baraka looked at Juma. Juma looked back. Because they both understood the danger at once. A guilty mother with a crumbling alibi was one threat. A panicked son with knowledge of the fire was another. If Kagiso ran, he might hide. If he talked, he might destroy his mother. If Naledi found him first, he might disappear just like Amala almost had. Juma stepped to the broken gap in the door. Through it he could see part of Nkubi's expensive sleeve, one security man crouched and nursing his shoulder, another standing ready. "Where is he going?" Juma asked. No one answered. Where he thundered. Ncube's voice returned, controlled but thinner now. "That is no longer your concern." Juma laughed once. It held no warmth. "My daughter's attempted murder is my concern. The boy who stood in that hallway is my concern. Every liar attached to that night is now my concern." He shoved the cabinet suddenly with Baraka's help hard enough to throw the damaged door fully open and stagger the men outside. Before they could reset, Juma lunged through the gap with a brutality that belonged less to boardrooms than to buried grief. He struck the nearest guard with the rod, drove his shoulder into the second, and sent both crashing into the wall. Baraka was right behind him. Ncube jumped back, fury lighting up his careful face. For the first time, Juma saw him without the lawyer's mask. Not elegant, not strategic. Afraid. "Move," Juma said. Ncube did not. Juma stepped into him until only inches remained between them. "You built legal cages around a child suffering," Juma said, voice almost calm now, which made it more terrifying. "If you speak to me again before you speak to investigators, I will personally ensure every license, every client, every polished lie you've ever lived behind turns to ash." Ncube tried to gather dignity. "Threats do not become you." Juma's eyes burned. Neither did fatherhood. "I'm correcting both problems." Then he pushed past him. They were halfway down the corridor when Ncube called after him. "You think Kagiso will save you?" "He won't." He was there. Juma stopped. Turned. Ncube smiled faintly now, cruel again, because cruelty was the only weapon left. "He saw more than you know. Ask yourself why Naledi kept him close all these years. Not to protect him from truth, to protect herself from what he remembers. That mattered. Maybe too much." Juma said nothing and kept moving. By the time they reached the car, rain had finally started, hard, sudden African rain slamming the streets like judgment. Baraka threw the witnesses into the back seat and sped away before anyone could follow cleanly through the downpour. Juma called Nombuso first. She answered on the second ring, breathless. What happened? Listen carefully. Amahle must not be alone tonight. Not anywhere. Not with anyone unexpected. Keep her close if she returns. She hasn't come back. That punched through him. If she does, call me immediately. A beat. Is it about Naledi? Yes. Another beat. Then it is worse than I thought. Yes. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. No answer. Kagiso. He tried again. Nothing. Baraka swerved around a flooded bus stop. Where would he go? Juma thought fast. Not the family house. Too obvious. Not friends from school. Naledi would check there first. Not hotels under his name. Kagiso was arrogant but not stupid. If he was running from his mother, he would go somewhere tied to memory. Not comfort. Then Juma remembered one detail from years ago. A lakeside lodge outside the city where Naledi used to send Kagiso after family scandals, bad press, or school fights. A private place. Quiet. Staff loyal to money, not questions. Turn east, Juma said. Baraka did at once. You know where guilty people send sons when they need them hidden. Rain hammered the windshield. Wipers fought and barely won. Behind them, Elias and Solomon sat in drenched silence, while the copied evidence rested inside Juma's jacket like a second heartbeat. As the city thinned into darker roads and long stretches of soaked bushland, Juma looked out into the storm and thought of two children. Amahle forced into poverty because adults wanted the future simplified. Kagiso raised inside ambition so long he may never have known where love ended and strategy began. One had lost everything. The other may have inherited poison. And now both were still in danger. So Baraka said quietly, eyes fixed ahead when we find him. What do you want? Juma watched lightning split the sky. The truth, he said. Then after a long pause, and whatever is left of my family after it. An hour later, the lodge lights appeared through the rain, but they were not the only lights. 3 black vehicles were already parked outside. Naledi had arrived first. Fan 10. The rain had softened by the time Juma stepped out of the car, but the night was still drenched with tension. The lodge stood above the dark lake like a secret built for wealthy shame. Warm lights behind wide glass, polished wooden decks, private cottages hidden among acacia trees. It was the kind of place where scandals came to disappear quietly. Tonight, nothing would disappear quietly. 3 black vehicles lined the gravel drive. One of them was Naledi's. Baraka came around the hood at once. We don't know how many people she brought. Juma looked at the main building, at the reflections trembling in the wet stone, at the guarded silence hanging over the place. Enough! He turned to Elias and Solomon in the back seat. Stay here. Lock the doors. If we don't come out in 20 minutes, send everything to every number Baraka wrote down. Elias nodded too quickly. Solomon looked like a man regretting every decision that had led him to this night. Baraka tucked the copied drive deeper into his jacket. Ready Juma was not ready. Not to face Naledi in her last corner. Not to face Kagiso in the shadow of that corridor. Not to face what fatherhood demanded after years of failure. But readiness had become a luxury. He walked anyway. Inside the lodge lobby was lit by hanging lanterns and expensive restraint. A receptionist stood frozen behind the desk, terror hidden badly beneath professional manners. At the far end of the room beside the dead fireplace, Naledi stood in a dark coat, elegant even now, as if disaster were merely another event requiring the correct posture. Kagiso sat in a leather chair near the windows. He looked nothing like his usual arrogant self. His hair was damp. One knee bounced uncontrollably. His phone lay face down on the table, ignored. He was not defiant tonight. He was cornered. Naledi turned as Juma entered. She did not smile. "You should not have come here," she said. Juma kept walking until only a few feet separated them. "That line is losing its effect." Naledi's eyes flicked toward Baraka, then toward the entrance behind him, measuring risk. Always measuring. "This is a private matter now," she said. "Send your driver outside." Baraka stayed exactly where he was. Juma answered for him. "No." Kagiso finally looked up. His face was pale. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, and for the first time since Juma had known him, he looked his age and every year of damage beneath it. "You found the video," Kagiso said. "Not a question." Juma's gaze moved to him. "Yes." Naledi cut in immediately. "You don't know what you found." Juma ignored her. "He told me you were there." Kagiso swallowed. "I was there," he said quietly. The room seemed to tighten. Naledi stepped toward her son. "Kagiso, say nothing else." He flinched. Not from the words, from the tone. Juma saw it and understood something with brutal clarity. Naledi had controlled this boy with the same instruments she used on adults. Fear, guilt, loyalty, twisted into debt. "Kagiso," Juma said, voice lower now. "Steadier, look at me." The young man did. "What happened that night?" Naledi snapped. "You have no right to interrogate him like this." Juma turned on her so fast that even she stepped back. "I have every right," he said. "A child was stolen, a woman died, my daughter grew up in a slum while you built a throne from ash. Do not speak to me about rights." The receptionist disappeared quietly through a side door. Good. No more witnesses who mattered less than truth. Kagiso's hands shook. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen like that." Naledi's face hardened. "Enough." No, Kagiso said suddenly, louder than before, startling even himself. "No, I'm tired." That was the first honest sound he had made all night. He rose unsteadily from the chair and looked at his mother with a mixture of fear and resentment that had probably been fermenting for years. "You said it was just to scare her," he said. "You said she heard something she shouldn't have heard, and Father would fix everything wrong if she made trouble. You said we only needed to keep her quiet until the papers were signed." Baraka went still. Juma felt every word like a nail. Naledi's voice dropped into ice. "Kagiso." "But the boy, no." The young man kept going. "I was 12, he said. I thought you meant send her away. Boarding school. Somewhere far. I didn't know Mandla had locked the side door. I didn't know there was paraffin in the cleaning closet. I didn't know." His voice broke. Juma did not interrupt. Across from him, Naledi stood straight as ever, but the perfection was gone now. What remained was harder, colder. A woman cornered past performance. "You are weak," she said to her son. Kagiso looked at her as if slapped. "No," Juma said softly. "He's late. There's a difference." Naledi laughed once. "Bitter." "Of course. Now you discover moral poetry." Juma took one step toward her. "And you never had any." Kagiso spoke again, faster now, like confession had finally broken through the dam. "Amale heard you arguing with Nkube. She repeated what you said about inheritance, about me being safer if she wasn't there. Mama Sade heard too. She told Amale to stay in the nursery and wait. Mother found out. She took me with her because she didn't trust me to stay quiet if I heard the shouting from elsewhere." Juma's chest burned. "And the fire?" he asked. Kagiso shut his eyes. Mandla lit the curtain in the side hall after pouring paraffin near the service cabinet. Mother said smoke would make everyone panic, and no one would ask the right questions. But it spread too fast. He looked sick now, remembering. Everything spread too fast. Baraka exhaled slowly through his nose. Juma's voice was almost a whisper. And Amahle Kagiso's eyes opened again, wet and haunted. Mama Sadeh grabbed her before the smoke got thick. I saw it. She ran the wrong way toward the laundry stairs, not the front hall. Mother told Mandla to stop her, but he couldn't get there before the beams fell. He swallowed hard. Then Mother said, "If Amahle survived outside the house, we were all ruined." The words landed like an execution. Naledi finally moved not backward, not toward apology, but forward into the ruins of her own defense. "You all speak as if power is grown in clean soil," she said. "It isn't. It is protected, fought for, secured. Juma built an empire and still expected the future to organize itself around sentiment. I did what men in his position do every day. I simply did it without pretending softness." Juma stared at her. That was her final truth. No remorse, no collapse, no desperate denial. Only ideology. A belief that wealth excused brutality as long as the result looked orderly. "You call that strength," Juma said. "It was cowardice dressed in silk." Naledi's lip curled. "And what was your role, Juma noble victim?" "Grieving father. Where were you when your daughter needed to know the sound of your footsteps in the house? Where were you when strangers learned her fears better than you did?" He let the accusation strike, because this time he did not need to defend himself against it. "I was absent," he said. "I was proud. I was blind. And for years that blindness made your crimes easier." He took another step forward. "But my guilt does not become your innocence." For the first time that night, Naledi had no immediate answer. Only anger. And anger had finally stopped being enough. Baraka's phone vibrated. He glanced at it, then handed it to Juma. A message from Nombuso. She came back. "She wants to see you. She knows everything now." Juma read it once and looked up. A strange calm passed through him. Not peace, not yet, but direction. He handed the phone back to Baraka and said, "Call the authorities. Now." Naledi's head snapped toward him. "You wouldn't. I already should have. You think the press will spare your daughter?" "No," Juma said. "So I won't give them her. I'll give them me." Naledi frowned. Juma turned to Kagiso. "When they arrive, you tell them exactly what you told me." Fear flashed across the young man's face. Then slowly he nodded. Naledi took one step toward her son. "If you do this, you destroy yourself." Kagiso looked at her with hollow clarity. "You did that years ago." That was the moment she truly lost. Not when evidence surfaced, not when Juma found Amahle, but when the son she had shaped chose truth over protection. Sirens sounded faintly in the distance, growing louder. Naledi closed her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them again, the queen was gone. Only the architect of ruin remained. "You are all sentimental fools," she said. "No," Juma replied. "We're just finished being afraid of you." The police arrived in under 10 minutes. Statements began. Phones were surrendered. Names were recorded. Naledi asked for counsel before the first formal question ended. Kagiso did not. That mattered too. Juma stepped outside while the first layer of law settled over the lodge. The rain had stopped completely. The lake lay dark and still beyond the deck, reflecting a torn moon through passing clouds. Baraka joined him. "They'll come after your company next?" "Yes." "Shareholders will panic?" "Yes." "Press will hunt?" Juma nodded. "Yes." Baraka studied him. "You seem calm." Juma looked out over the water. "Because for the first time in 8 years I know which fire I'm supposed to walk into." An hour later, near midnight, he stood again in Makena Junction. No convoy, No bodyguards, no cameras. Only one father, one quiet street, one open doorway lit by a tired lantern. Nombuso stood aside and let him enter. Amahle was there. She sat on the mattress beside Teboho, who slept easier tonight after medicine Juma had already paid for through Baraka without attaching his name. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but steady now. Not soft, not welcoming. Steady. Juma stopped a few feet away. For a moment neither spoke. Then Amahle asked, "Is it true, all of it?" "Yes," he said. She lowered her gaze. "Then who am I supposed to be now?" The question broke what little remained of his heart. He knelt not to dramatize, not to beg, but because truth finally required him to come down from every height he had once lived on. "You do not have to become anyone new tonight," he said. "You are Amahle. You are Zuri. You are the girl who survived what should have destroyed her. No lie can take that from you now." Tears filled her eyes again, but she did not look away. "And you," she whispered, "who are you supposed to be?" Juma took that blow and accepted it. "A man learning too late," he said. "A father if you ever allow it. And whether you do or not, I will still spend the rest of my life making sure no one steals from you again." The room was silent except for Teboho's softer breathing. Amahle looked at Nombuso, then back at Juma. "When I was little," she said quietly, "I used to dream of a house with a piano and a man I couldn't quite see. I thought maybe I invented it because hunger invents strange things." Juma's throat tightened. "You didn't invent it." She nodded once, absorbing the pain of that. Then, after a long pause, she moved slightly on the mattress and made a small space beside her. Not forgiveness, not reunion, but space. For tonight it was more than enough. Juma sat. Nombuso said nothing. She simply pulled the torn curtain a little wider so the room could breathe. Outside, the slum remained what it had always been, hard, alive, unjust human. But inside that small room, something new began. Not the return of an old family. Something better. The building of a true one. Some people think family is protected by money walls and a famous name. But this story reminds us that a family can still fall apart even inside the most beautiful house if truth is missing and love is absent. Real love is not proven by power. It is proven by presence. It is proven by who stays, who sacrifices, who protects, and who tells the truth when lies would be easier. Juma learned too late that success means nothing if the people you love are left unguarded. Amahle's journey teaches us that pain can steal comfort, identity, and childhood, but it cannot completely destroy a brave heart. And Nombuso shows us that sometimes the people with the least resources carry the greatest humanity. In the end, justice is not only about punishing the guilty. It is also about facing your own failures, choosing humility, and rebuilding what was broken with honesty, patience, and compassion. Some wounds do not heal because time passes. They heal because someone finally chooses truth over pride, love over control, and responsibility over excuses. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments which moment moved you the most and what lesson stayed with you. And if you enjoy powerful emotional stories about truth, justice, and healing, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more journeys like this.